And yeah, if Matt hasn't decided to kill me after the last episode, that should be good for him. And welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, J. Mike Folson.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, welcome back indeed, because apparently this is part 2 of a in a series that I apparently it's going to be at least 3 parts. I thought it was going to be 2, so this is our 100th episode spectacular. We're talking about All-Star Superman, which is a fantastic, some might even say the greatest Superman comic ever made. And so we thought that episode 99 was going to be us talking about the comics, and then episode 100 was us talking about the animated movie, and that was going to be all she wrote. But our guests for our conversation about the comics are wonderfully intelligent nerds. That conversation went real long for the first 6 issues, and we're like, oh god, we need to take a break. So we're back from that break, and we're back with June Munford.
Hi, I've taken 20,000 words worth of notes since the break.
The scary thing is, possibly true. And we've also got Alan Kistler.
You're welcome. Sorry. I couldn't resist. Hello again.
So we're continuing our conversation about All-Star Superman. We got through the first 6 issues before, and those are a lot of fun. And now we're about to pick up when things start getting a little bit darker. But let's just get into it, because you honestly need to start with part 1 if you're going to be listening to this episode. Just go back. Like, this is not the episode to start on for all you new people. I don't care what Jim Shooter says. So
there are many reasons you should not care what Jim Shooter says on certain topics.
On certain topics, yeah. So we're talking about issue 7 now, which is the Bizarro issue of All-Star Superman. And it's a weird take where it's a lot creepier and it's a lot more preternatural. It's like this like Cthulhu-esque kind of like coming up from the darkness kind of element. So yeah, let's talk about where it kind of opens. Like, Superman's letting his pet Sun Eater go, and then is all of a sudden ambushed and dragged into this cubic hell that is Bizarro World.
And that's also at the same time while Earth is experiencing the horrors of Bizarro World, sending its goopy folks to bizarrify people.
Yeah, this is very much Bizarro as like a zombie kind of concept in a lot of ways.
Very much so.
That was new. I was not expecting that. Because once again, it was my first time reading that. And so like in the movie, they don't really touch on this at all. So I went from like really depressing dad death scene to space zombies that turn you into clay people.
It's a tale as old as time.
Yeah, and I was like, this took a turn.
I actually, when I interviewed Dwayne McDuffie about the film adaptation, I did bring up the lack of Bizarro, and he said, I mean, and there were going to be lack of certain things because for whatever reason, someone decided a while ago that the animated movies are going to top out at 70 minutes usually. They had 70 minutes to adapt All-Star Superman. Now, a little bit later, they decided, well, we can't possibly cut the story short for our animated adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns, so we'll just make that a 2-parter. And I really am still resentful that attitude was not given to All-Star Superman or certain other comic book arcs, but here we are. So you're going to cut out stuff anyway, but Dwayne also said if you're going to cut out anything, the Bizarro stuff is kind of easier to make a decision on cutting out because certain parts of the conceit, especially the language that the Bizarros use, that reverse speech pattern, is much more difficult to pull off and truly absorb when it's being done in audio-visual form. Reading, your mind kind of works to translate it, and you can work at your own pace. Hearing people talk like that and having the scene continue without waiting for you to catch up can be very jarring. And so that was one of the reasons why that was one of the things decided that would be left out of the story. And that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that when we did our Bizarro episode. Like, it is hard sometimes to translate the written word when it is written intentionally in a weird way to a spoken thing and have it not really hurt your brain. So I do get that part.
Yeah, I mean, the recent Superman and Lois TV show, when it dealt with its own version of Bizarro, did kind of a clever thing of literally just when the Bizarro Superman speaks, it's just reverse dialogue, as if you played a tape backwards. And it was sort of a new fun twist on it, I thought. But with this, yeah, like you said, it's both a familiar take on Bizarro because it's got sort of that cute absurdity to it. They bring back again, so much of the series has to do with Otto Binder, the Silver Age writer of many a Superman tale. Otto Binder, along with doing the stories of Superman meeting Atlas and Hercules and Samson, he also created the Bizarro world, the original idea of the Bizarro world, which was that Bizarro at a certain point just wasn't going to stick on Earth. It was too weird. It was too against his ideas of how the world should be. Bizarro being an imperfect attempt at cloning Superman. And so he thinks in reverse, and later on some of his powers are even in reverse with ice vision and heat breath. And Superman helped him find another planetoid and terraform it into a square planet. Thus, it's a version of Earth as imperfect as he is. Hatre, Earth spelled backwards. He populates it with a Bizarro population. It's adorable. They have a whole code of conduct about acting in reverse and promoting ugliness and imperfection. And it's great. And we start with that. There's the big cube planet in the sky. And then we shift it into zombie film and then keep on going into cosmic horror. A gravity well is sucking the planet into the underverse, but then also into depression. And it's one of those Morrison ideas where I look at it and think that's so weird, and yet it works so well. It seems like that was always how it was meant to be. It seems obvious in retrospect that a Bizarro world would exist in a dimension of gravity, heavy currents, and emotional depression.
Yeah, and this like predatory nature to the planet. Like it's a cube version of Earth because it's trying to imitate Earth to make us not notice that it's a threat until it's too late. Like that kind of element of it all is like so creepy and weird. And it feels so Morrisonian in terms of like the way they present ideas of like, oh yeah, this is a parasitic idea. This is a meme that's going to kill you all. This is a world from another dimension that is actively stalking our own and like imitating it and sucking its life out.
It is very much a hellish presentation, right? It is not a whimsical presentation. And in fact, this is another big strength of Jamie Grant as the colorist here. But these are the only two issues that really have this color palette going on. And it is a hellish color palette. Deep purples, dark reds, browns, grays. It's so different than the way we're presented everything else. And I love not only their approach to Bizarro, which is that, Bizarro's #1 is still out there. And there's a King Bizarro that's, like a horrible version of Superman's dad. But, the real character here, I think, is Zabaro, which is presented as such a direct analog to Superman. But if Superman were lost in like solipsism and isolation and just eternal inward looking, right? Like all that Zabaro does is talk about how alone he is and how different and unique he is and how people can understand him. And it's such a parallel to Clark struggling with his own death this entire time, but now it's in his face as like a parody of his own grief.
And how perfect that it comes at this point in the story, because we had if you look at this whole series as a story arc, we start off with the new status quo. I'm dying. We then rise into Superman dealing with that new status quo, being inspired to find new adventures, new directions, try new things. Then we get to that halfway point of confronting the past and opening old wounds while mending them. And now we're sliding into the depression of, oh, just as I got a reminder of my younger self seeing things he couldn't stop, there are things that can bring me down in a variety of levels. And we go into our journey into the underworld that we'll have to rise out of again later. And again, it can only be accomplished with help. One of the big themes of this whole storyline. I mean, when you bring up it's a hellish representation, like I completely agree, and it's more than that. It's also, to me, old world idea of hell, of dark, cold, barren. Things can't grow, things can't be built, or at least not properly. It's that old idea of hell and a Hades underworld being more akin to desolate caverns than some place where you're roasted and there's light everywhere.
Yeah, a place of shadows, like the Greek idea that it's your shade is the spirit that continues into the afterlife. And bringing up Hades, though, I think is a good time. We didn't really talk about this last time, that this idea of 12 labors of Superman in this all. And there are certainly strong parallels here to Hercules' descent and pulling Cerberus out.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, maybe it's not one-to-one, but it's certainly a trip into the underworld is very much like this mythic adventure that a lot of epic heroes really do. And this is Superman's version of that.
Also, I think that there's a common sort of idea that floats around with Superman, which is that Superman is some sort of Christ-like figure. But I think here he's more clearly, as Alan pointed out, presented as almost an old world figure of Christianity, where he's doing the Dante's Inferno kick and he's slowly descending into hell one step at a time with the fear that he himself would become a denizen of hell, right? It's not just that Superman is going here to, get out or save Earth or whatever. He has to understand the people that live there and understand Zabaro's, complete self-absorbment. I mean, it's not only does the Dante approach hit me, but Zabaro is such a Byronic hero, right? Like this classical, ambiguous, unique. They're cooler than the other people, but they're very alone and they're very self-absorbed. They're very poetic. They talk about their own emotions through the lens of, well, I know poetry and I know beauty and I can see the sunset and nobody else sees what I see in the sunset. It's such an interesting version of Superman as a Christ figure, because at the end of the story, he doesn't escape hell and find righteousness. He tells the people of hell to stand up and stand up for each other and that they can help each other and they can want better too.
Bringing up the Dante's Inferno comparison, Zabaro really feels like Virgil. Now that you say that out loud, like that's a really strong comparison.
And it also it's so great to me because it's absolutely going into those mythological ideas. And I mean, Superman himself, the idea of him being more of a Christ-like figure is more newish, and it's slightly there in the Christopher Reeve films, and it's smacking you in the head with a hammer in Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, where it seemed like they're literally scenes set up of like, do you get it? But I mean, he is in his golden age form in 1938 and the next few years forward is more of that Old Testament kind of champion, of a mythic champion. His inspirations include, Gilgamesh and Hercules and John Carter of Mars, and his origin very much speaks of Moses. But the idea that mythic idea of the Shadowlands, I also just find so perfect, because before we created Bizarro, we had a couple stories where Superman fought a being called the Phantom Superman, who was this ethereal copy created, and then they did another version of him being a negative Superman where he looked like a photo negative, and then finally they took that idea yet again and made it into Bizarro, the imperfect clone who seems to mean well but doesn't see things properly or in the right context and doesn't understand our point of view, and so half the time causes harm and havoc. Yeah, like as you said, Zabaro is so interesting. It's taking an old idea. In 1959, in Action Comics 254, there was a character introduced called New Bizarro, who Bizarro made an imperfect duplicate of himself, which then looked identical to Superman, still didn't think quite right or speak quite right, and then tried to help Superman against Bizarro. And here, Morrison takes that idea, the reverse of the imperfect duplicate, who's more like Superman, more like a brother to Superman. But yeah, he's this ironic character where, like, because of the greater awareness, he's more greatly aware of how flawed the world is and that no one else can see what he sees. And it's such an interesting exercise because again, like all these different chapters are reflecting different aspects of Superman's life or his friends or his world. And here we do have, what if Clark hadn't had the Kents? And there are a lot of other storytellers who decide, well, if Clark didn't have the Kents, if Clark didn't have the emotional support, and people like the Legion of Superheroes or like Lana or Lois, who maybe they can't quite understand him, but they were trying, and they're trying to see his point of view, and they're trying to connect with him, and that counts for something. If Clark had none of that, some storytellers argue, well, then he takes over, or he becomes this vicious killer, or he, is Hitler with a cape. Or he tries to be Superman, but he's just lethal and knocks over buildings. And here Morrison is saying, oh, no, he might just get depressed. He might just become this lone poet wishing for other worlds, but not having any motivation or any sense of that being something he can accomplish.
Yeah, there's a real nature versus nurture conversation there where, like, your best qualities can be nurtured, but you're not necessarily exclusively built upon that. Like, you can have a foundation of good just in who you are. I mean, that's I think a through line for all of Morrison's take on it. I mean, we talk about how they talk the senses that they experience when they have superpowers, when Lois and Lex in this, that it drives them to do good. And that's a common idea that Morrison shows whenever whenever they're doing a Superman story. Constantly, like going back to World War III at the end of the JLA arc, where Oracle stands up and it's like all those feelings you're feeling all right now that make you want to make this world a better place. That's what Superman experiences every day. And that, I think, like if you didn't have the Kents, if you didn't have all these things, you might not take that good foundation and bring it to fruition. Like, you might not have the best version of Superman, but you would still have a person who can see the beauty. They're just very lonely and sad about it. And that's kind of Zabaro here. Side note, this is just a dumb aside. So my dad can't pronounce Zabaro's pizza, and like he also, same way that like dads just can't say Chipotle, they just say Chipotle or whatnot, and so he always says Zabaro, and like I can't look at that and that kind of thing.
You just keep thinking of Michael Scott's favorite New York pizza spot,
right? Exactly.
Yeah, it's but even here, there's so much. It's again like, because this could be just a melancholic chapter, and again, June rightly points out the coloring and the lighting and the tone that's established. Like, my God, just such a stark contrast, especially after seeing the bright colors of visiting Smallville with the Superman squad.
Yeah, now it's just dark reds.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, Morrison talked one time about you're going through the day as you go through this series. So you start off with an adventure on the sun almost, and that's the dawn of our story, and then you're going through all these adventures that have a lot of sunlight, and then the sun starts settling down, and then at this point in the story arc, we're going into the night of our story, or maybe the twilight leading into night, with our deep reds and our grays rising. And it's again that reading it month to month didn't pick up on that. Once you read it as a whole, and once you hear Grant say that, oh man, it's so clear. Like, you are following this sunrise and fall and rise again of Superman's life, of Superman's final days. And in the midst of even that depression of the Bizarro world, you have comedy, because you have some of the delightful dialogue of the Bizarros. I love Bizarros, and I love the Bizarro Justice League, which Geoff Johns cribbed later for when he did Escape from Bizarro World, and he recreated a version that was clearly influenced by the All-Star Superman Bizarro Justice League. I love him. I love the silly Bizarro Lantern and the Flash. I love that Batman's not there because his parents shot him. That also feels like a great callback to one of my favorite Bizarro jokes, which was so dark but so perfect, where when the crisis happened in the mid-'80s and DC was redoing its canon and its continuity and rebooting many characters, they still, for a few characters, they did give a final story to. And with Bizarro in the end of, I think it was DC Comics Presents, we saw the death of the Bizarro world, and it's emulating the death of Krypton, the planet's exploding, and one of the final scenes is Bizarro Lois coming up to Bizarro number 1, our imperfect version of Superman, and asking, "Where is our child?" And Bizarro number 1 saying, "No worry, me send him to center of planet so him die first." And then the planet blows up. And it's so dark, and I love it.
That's so beautiful.
It's so wrong.
Apparently, you can successfully do a dead baby joke, but
That's the only one that works for me.
a lot of work to make it happen. Yeah, it's so funny because like looking at it when it was coming out issue to issue, like the first, again, some of these are really quick reads. Like the first part of this is like blink and you miss it. Like, oh yeah, there's like kind of a zombie invasion thing going on with it, and then they have some jokes about male performance enhancers or like whatnot going with Lombard.
Yeah, Lombard's using a blue pill, and so he's immune to zombie virus.
That's where you cut to the ad, King.
Wonder if we could pull like a legit like old school Bob Dole ad.
Do you want to survive when the Bizarros show up? It's BlueChew.com.
Right. We need a PED for your E.
Hey!
Or whatever the slogans are for that one. Man, I wish we were making money on this show. I would rep Blue Chew.
It's not too late to call up some sponsors.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, who knows now? But that first part is so quick, and then all of a sudden you're on Bizarro World, and you're expecting it to be more of the zaniness, and there is that. Like we said, the Justice League is hilarious. Every moment with them is fantastic.
So good.
The statue of Wonder Woman, like great stuff. But then we get these like pensive moments with Zibaro, and it's so nice there. And then it's also kind of fucked up at the end where like Superman's like, well, I gotta test this because you're not going to survive this thing. But like there is something beautiful that you are creating in this world. And I don't know, it feels like bittersweet. Like he actually can't take this person who's trapped there. Again, like kind of making that like Virgil comparison.
Yeah, actually, I love that comparison because the idea of him being the only one that crosses over. I mean, one of the things he promises is that he'll come back, right? Oh, I'll come back for you. Right, knowing that he's going to die, and I'm sure he's not saying that disingenuously. I'm assuming he's still sitting there on his deathbed, going, "No, I'm going to help you one day," and truly believes it. But that doesn't really speak to what we know about the narrative as a whole.
It is something that's a recurring theme with certain characters who get close to Superman or have sort of a familial connection to him, because the Silver Age, to which so much of this series is a love letter to, also established certain it expanded Superman's world while also adding a lot of bittersweet things to it. One of those was the Bottle City of Kandor, which will show up much more prominently later in this series. And the idea there that the Bottle City was a city of Kryptonians, and the whole city was captured, miniaturized, and kept as a lab specimen by Brainiac, one of my favorite Superman villains ever. And Superman liberates the Bottle City of Kandor, but doesn't have the technology to safely enlarge them all. And throughout the 60s and 70s, up until about the early 80s, in that Silver Age canon, it's this. The Bottle City of Kandor was both a fun setting for out-of-the-box stories of Superman miniaturizing himself so he could visit it, and he didn't have his powers there because it simulates Krypton's environment, and so he's more vulnerable, but also he's learning about his culture, da-da-da-da. But also, it's an ongoing...
He's pretending to be Batman so he could be Nightwing.
Exactly. Right. He takes on a custom identity, and he just wants to be like his best friend. But it's also a constant reminder of readers, again, of there are tragedies ongoing in Superman's life. He can't help the last of his people. His race isn't exactly extinct, but it's not thriving either. He's going to blame that on himself. Likewise, the Silver Age brought us Monel, an alien explorer who initially, due to amnesia, meets teenage Superman, meets teenage Clark Kent. They assume, due to some evidence, he might be a long-lost older brother. They find out he's not, and then basically through a trick Superman pulled and didn't realize how dangerous it would be, Mon-El gets poisoned and must be sent into the Phantom Zone or else he'll die. And the Phantom Zone keeps him, from aging, keeps his body from being affected because it turns you into a phantom, basically. And it's one of those things where, again, this was a recurring thing throughout the years in Superman comics of he wants to find a way to free Mon-El, to help Mon-El, to find something that'll cure Mon-El and get him out there. And he kind of can't. Like, it's someone he can't save. And he can even see Mon-El through the Phantom Zone monitor and just know, oh, I can't help him. And then later comics confirm, yeah, you don't. He eventually gets out in the 30th or 31st century. But you don't get to help him. All that time, he goes to slow way. That's something you have to deal with. And so Zabaro sort of seems to me an echo of those kinds of Silver Age stories. I made a connection and then I had to leave them behind and I want to take them with, I want to help them and I can't.
Yeah. The Mon-El comparison is also nice considering that Zabaro has that same reverse color scheme, like the red body with the blue cape and so forth, which, yeah, it feels like a similar kind of, this is a character trapped in a Phantom Zone, even if it's not the Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
Here.
I think that's a brilliant observation. It actually ties into one of the notes I took about sort of how Bizarro World is presented, not just as this is a separate planet, but it is under our own reality. It is a sicker, worse version of our world. It's not just an opposite. That's, I think, where the difference between this interpretation comes in. And God, I know it's always great to bust out the poetry in hour 3 of your podcast case, but it's
sure.
But there is something very telling here at the beginning of issue 7, where Leo Quintum calls Bizarro World a gulf o' glamour, gay grim, which comes from an anonymous Irish poem about witnessing the fairies, but was reinterpreted into a relatively well-known sort of postmodernist poem in the early 80s by a man named Norman Shaw. And that quote that Quintum uses is a direct reference to the Shaw poem, which, if you don't mind, I would like to read a piece of it here, because I think it's very telling of what Morrison's entire thing here is with this Bizarro presentation. Amethyst Avenue, twixt towards worlds under the full moon's ladder, gulf of glamour, gay grim, infinities of despair. Unholy mountain climb, necks craning aghast at the tower that stretches to the far away, bringing it close, so close. The above and the below are forever parted, and only now fused together on borrowed time. Out on the ebbing borders of liminal lands forlorn, there are no differences twixt mind and matter. Dualities dissolve. Enter the lords of chaosmosis, white dot heart of the black-hearted heavily guarded. Dreams within nightmares within dreams within nightmares, books within books, words like birds flapping gone, and in the silent text the patterns thronging, waving, sonorous, opalescent. Now, there's a lot going on in this poem, and the poem itself is, every little line I just read you is accented with a footnote, and sometimes the footnotes are longer than the entire poem itself. But essentially what this poem is it's a reinterpretation of an ancient old Irish fairy tale poem, which of course it is. We're talking about Morrison here. But the story is about an average, anxious, depressed person meeting a fairy, a symbol of another world in Irish mythology. It's not just that fairies come here and they live here. They are from another reality. And we seeing fairies are a brief glimpse of that other reality. By quoting this poem, Morrison's making the comparison here that Bizarro World and Earth actually aren't any different, really. That you can argue which one's real and which one's isn't, but Superman has to exist within both and see the connections between both. And of course, because we're talking meta, this sort of like meta approach towards writing, it's books within books and stories within stories. Candor is such a great example of literally Superman getting to tell different kinds of superhero stories because he's in a story on story on story on story on story. I love the idea of, that kind of follow through Morrison's writing, that fiction is real and reality is fiction. There's very thin line between those two. And Superman's job in these two works are to synthesize the two, to treat the fiction, no matter how absurd it is or how different it is, as it's just as important, just as emotionally valid, and almost a lens to see the real world. They're the same thing, because Superman has the luxury or burden of having to exist in both.
And this is why I love having you on the show.
I just have an English lit degree and talk too much. It's all good. But
no, it's great, because it's exactly what we want to have these discussions about. The deeper themes that are going on with just what starts off as a basic. We want to use Bizarro, which is just bad copy, and kind of just having some cheeky fun at all that. And then we find a way to have like this larger conversation about our world. I mean, looking at the Bizarro world that we see evidence of crass commercialism all over. There's like McDonald's parodies and stuff like that they're interacting with. The rocket that he escapes with is all the junk that they produce. Like reality itself. Like, you can't look at this Bizarro world and not say that there's some kind of social commentary going on. And it is so... It is so fun to be able to take a step back and sort of like take that all in, because otherwise you could just be like, oh yeah, Superman's in a weird dimension. How's he going to get back? Because that's the very surface. Like, this is the thing that we get the kids in for, and then the reason why we are rereading this and doing these deeper analyses is because you can put on these additional layers.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're using fiction as a lens to understand the real world, and then you act on that understanding, then how fictitious was it in the first place? It's affecting real life now. So, I think that's a very telling element of Superman's kind of history, where, any sort of insane, wild spectacle can come across him, but he always walks away from it with a sense of shared humanity and a desire to understand the thing in front of him, which I think is such an interesting counterbalance to Zabaro here, who has zero interest in the world outside of himself.
Yeah, I mean, he's come to resent the world around him, and it's understandable. I mean, it's again using cosmic stories to talk about human issues and relatable issues. I mean, we've all had those days or weeks where we seem to be in the Bizarro world, in the Underverse. We're just surrounded by. We still have the knowledge we had before, and we know what things can be better, but we're not seeing it be better, and we're just surrounded by junk and shattered dreams and capitalism and all these things. But it's also Superman escaping the Underverse and the gravitational pull of Bizarro World, and being, such a, from Morrison's point of view, a character who embraces being fictional by embracing the impossible and imagination and everything. Reminds me of in New X-Men Annual, I want to say 2001, when Morrison was writing the X-Men main title and retitled it New X-Men, there was a line where Cyclops, the leader of the X-Men, the field leader, is talking to a being that seems to be made of electromagnetic energy and is causing a gravity well and da-da-da. And things are looking bad, and Cyclops brings up, this is affected by your mind, this is affected by your thoughts. So think about how some, say, a black hole collapsing becomes a white hole somewhere else, and says, imagine everything you can do, and then says imagination is the only thing which can survive a gravitational collapse. Yeah, I just think about that line when I see Superman escaping in the end of this little story arc. The gravity pull of depression and the Underverse. And
we're left with Zabaro reaching actually up and kind of happy. Like, Superman gave him that moment of saying, like, oh, you're writing, you're taking in of all this is not only valid, it's important, and it's something that should be encouraged, and like you're left with a Zabaro that is more hopeful in it all. So even though he doesn't like free him from this underworld, he's still a shade in the space. Like, he is now at least given a new sense of optimism in it all, and that is ultimately what Superman's trying to do throughout this entire adventure.
And there's beauty there, because Zabaro is literally, in his face talking to him, just this very grotesque parody of his own grief and what he's feeling in that moment, the life that he's living when he's sinking down to these places. And he's still able to reject that. Do you know what I mean? He's still able to go, yeah, you're fictive. Yeah, you're fake. Yeah, this is the worst version of me, and I have to look you in the face. But because he's Superman, he doesn't accept that. He goes, well, wait a second. There could be beauty and value in what Zabaro is doing if only someone bothered to look.
Yeah, depression isn't an enemy to fight. It's something to confront and process and accept. And that's such a... It's, again, like you see so many of these characters, you know, some of these stories aren't clean. Some of the lessons aren't clean. That's fine because people are messy. And Superman, you know, isn't demanding that you be anything else. Yeah, it's really lovely.
So why don't we move on, however, to the next story where Superman crash lands back on Earth and supposedly has been replaced, apparently by Kryptonian scientists who want to terraform Earth, but aren't Zod style, we're going to terraform Earth to be, you know, New Krypton in a evil way so much as just...
We're better than you.
Yeah, just like it's a colonialist way as opposed to, I don't know. It's bad. It's just not as bad. That's what I'm trying to say.
They're futurists. They believe in the potential of technology and living in the future. And they go into the Fortress of Solitude and they look at Superman's entire history of his own life and goes, well, that's just morbidity, actually. You're just thinking about death too much. This is the past, and we don't live in the past. Which is such an, like, Superman is building all this stuff to be remembered, and these two show up and goes, no one gives a shit if you're remembered. We're living in the future now. It's very direct and confrontational.
It is. And one of the things, there's versions of the Superman canon where, in a lot of Superman canon, Krypton had a space program, but then by the time Superman's being born, they no longer have a space program. And this is part of why Jor-El and Lara have to make a prototype rocket ship, a prototype spaceship, and, you know, don't have time to make a bigger one or don't get the resources to make a space ark for everyone and all that jazz. There's no space program anymore. And in a couple of versions of the canon, the idea was that Krypton had its colonization period. And especially when they saw how powerful they got on certain worlds, took it on themselves to change those worlds to their mind for the better and take over. Because, well, if nature made us this way, then, you know, there seems to be a hierarchy that's just built in. And then, of course, like, you know, they get their asses kicked eventually, and then they go back to Krypton and decide, well, we don't need a space program because actually this is the perfect place. This brand of menace, I won't call it exactly evil, but it is menace and it is a threat. And it's just as the other stories we've been looking at things that are more human, this is much more, I hesitate to say realistic, but much more grounded in political threats today and political wars that actually happen in history, where it's usually not someone saying, I'm going to conquer Earth. Colonization, empire expansion is justified as we're improving that. Look at how those people live, for God's sake. You know, they need us there. Or worse, you know, they're children and we're here to teach them, or worse than that, they're not even human. And we're going to tame their lands and we'll give them a real purpose. So at least they get to do something and, you know, bask in our knowledge and evolution and social all this jazz. It's so insidious because it's like with racism, it's like with misogyny, like a lot of it is not intended to be that. It's not intended to be harmful. It's someone thinking, well, this just makes sense, right? And it's so much harder to argue against. It's so much harder to see in yourself as harmful, as something that should be defeated. So the frustration here, and I mean, Superman just had a couple issues of frustration dealing with a bizarro world where people literally can't understand what he's saying half the time. Now he's dealing with this frustration of, this isn't Luthor, this isn't Zod, where he can say, no, you don't get to do genocide and hurt people. Screw you. It's a different frustration of like, they really think they're acting on the side of right. And, you know, we're bringing back a superior culture, which why didn't you do that already? They're not even seeing him as a threat or someone who needs to oppose because they think he's evil. He's just a naive kid. And maybe he's
yeah, they say he's gone native.
Yeah. And he might be kind of dumb. And, you know, God, that's infuriating when you face that. And then a lot of us have faced that attitude, especially it seems in the last few years. And it's just this, how do you face that? How do you reason with that?
Yeah, just raw arrogance in your face. Like they're well-meaning, but they won't even listen to the value of the people of this world.
This entitlement. And again, like with Luther, the like self-focus, but in such a different way.
Yeah, the modern parallels are very striking for me when you look at a lot of the technology that venture capital has invested in medical technology over the last 5 or 10 years. There's such an obsession in the tech world of outliving death, right? Like you can look at Peter Thiel's work with blood. You can look at Theranos. You can look at Bill Gates and Microsoft's obsession with things like vaccines. These aren't governmental entities, and yet they're throwing themselves all in on these projects that are very much about public health and some broader view of what health or death means. Of course, people are still dying.
Right. It's privatized public health.
Exactly. But I think the interesting analogy here is that, the first time I read this series, this is my least favorite issue. I felt it's like there's nothing here, really. This time, I think there's something interesting going on in that their attitude, their belief towards the world, their superiority, it's kind of snapped into focus when Superman tells them, actually, you two are rotting out from the inside and are going to die too. You have a deep sickness inside of you that you can't even see and you haven't paid attention to. The radiation belts out in space are killing you, and you don't even know when you're sitting here talking about the future. And so I think it's very interesting that, like, the challenge it's not a fight, but it is a threat. And the threat is not by Superman winning ideologically, but by going, hey, you are missing things about yourself. And that is really important because, if nobody bothered to tell you were dying, all of these plans wouldn't mean anything.
Well, it's just so sudden when all of a sudden that rot starts to catch up with them, and like it's such a painful sequence as they like go blind and like are put on deathbed, like almost after this moment of them being bullies. Like they are acting aggressively. They're doing all these things. I think one thing that should be noted is that they're not just Kryptonians. Like it's Bar-El, like he's of the House of El, like that. It's family. Like, and they are trying to do what they see as good, but they are so arrogant and also sick, and that you can't help but have pity for them at the end.
Like when you have Thanksgiving and your uncle really needs to talk about a political view that you just don't want to hear.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because again, the contrast of it's not as insidious or overtly evil a thing as Darkseid or Luther want to do regarding the fate of Earth. And once they are confronted with, I mean, they're sort of, they're almost like that venture capitalist or celebrity story of once having attained power or fame, you somehow tell yourself this was always meant to be, as opposed to remembering, oh, well, since I didn't have it once before, I might not have it again in the future. If my rise has shown that states can change, then states can change. But they don't absorb that until it's forced upon them. And then it's sympathy without expectation of reward or without gloating that gets them to say, okay, we were wrong about you. And it's not necessarily that they think necessarily all their beliefs were wrong. They haven't had time to really reflect on that yet, but it's a start. And I find that really key because, again, if Superman loves us and Superman believes in us, then you need to show certain things justifying some of that. And it can't just be that his friends are great and his enemies are evil. There has to be some aspect of empathy leading to understanding, leading to a step towards redemption, which could lead to another step and which could lead to another one. If you don't have concrete evidence that sometimes redemption can happen, then you are undermining a story of someone who loves us so much that he believes one day we won't blow ourselves up, that one day we won't need a Superman.
I think it's interesting that you put such an importance on that scene, because I feel like it's like, on this reading more than anything else, that scene is the climax of the book. I mean, this is the first moment where, since Clark is being made aware of his own death, that he actually witnesses death in front of him. And whatever is going on with the two, the Kryptonians, Superman is watching them die with dignity, and the ability to cut through their belief system comes when they realize they care for each other, right? The words that the two Kryptonians are saying before they die are directed not at Superman, but at each other. And in witnessing, seeing people die with dignity and hope and to have some sense of resolution, right? Like the ending is literally them standing in Superman heaven beating up the bad guys. Like it's this point in which the rest of the narrative kicks in, and in 10, 11, 12, Superman begins his plan to die. He's laying all his dominoes on the table. But he doesn't start doing that until he's actually forced to face it up close and see that there could be a dignity and a beauty or a death if you don't have to be alone.
Absolutely right. And the fact that also it's so fascinating to me that the last moment in the story is they're dying, but their essence is sent into the Phantom Zone, and they actually find new purpose and perhaps a better purpose. And that's so fascinating because the Phantom Zone, by and large, has been this metaphorical hell dimension that Superman inherits the keys to. Like, Dad found the keys to hell. And, I keep the door to it in my Arctic clubhouse. The Phantom Zone started off as really an idea of the fourth dimension in Action Comics 131 in 1949. Luthor uses a ray to send Superman into the fourth dimension, and Superman is able to influence an electric typewriter to tell Lois what the hell happened and how to get him out. That story then got repeated in the 1950 Superman serial Superman vs. the Atom Man, where they refer to it as the Empty Doom. You then had a couple more stories where, like, Jimmy Olsen got accidentally sent to the fourth dimension and influenced a typewriter, Clark Kent typewriter, and then Lois got accidentally sent to the fourth dimension and influenced a typewriter that was conveniently in between Jimmy and Perry and Clark, and told them, "I'm not dead. I was teleported to the fourth dimension. Please help me." And then finally it got turned into the Phantom Zone in 1961 in Adventure Comics 283, where you learn that Jor-El, and later they talked in that series, in that issue, about he discovered the Phantom Zone and built the Phantom Zone projector, and it was used to exile the worst criminals. And the first two criminals we learned about were Dr. Zadu and General Zod. Later they expanded on it further that Jor-El had actually been looking for parallel Earths and parallel Kryptons, I should say. And in failing to find them, found this sub-dimension that became the Phantom Zone, and it could be presented as an alternative to the death penalty because he just found that barbaric. Or even an alternate thing that they had of keeping criminals in cryosuspension, which had its own problematic nature. But while that was a good intention, the Phantom Zone we saw was hellish. It was a place where you are a phantom, and you could, in the original presentation of it, perceive the world around you and hear it, but not interact. You become a ghost wandering through the physical world, forced to look at everything you can't participate anymore, and so truly have nothing to reflect on but what you're missing out on and what you did to get you here. And hopefully you figure that stuff out, and then Superman, will hear your parole argument and let you out. A lot of times didn't happen that way, and they just become bitter people, hell-bent on revenge and looking for ways to break out and all this jazz. And the fact that these two Kryptonians we meet, who've been so arrogant, so entitled, don't even say, just let me die, or, just pop me in the head with heat vision and just end it now. But take it as, even if it's the Phantom Zone, if there's a chance we can still be together, yeah, let's do it. And once they see, okay, we are here, we are together, we need purpose. Hey, maybe it's only hell because we let it be hell. We get to shape what this place is. And what a great idea of, like, two people taking control of their narrative.
And therefore their own deaths, right? Like, they have zero time. Superman's got a whole 12 issues to do it. These folks get 3 panels. And yet it's no less effective.
Yeah, it is a very beautiful moment when they, like, hold hands, and then when we see them, like, kind of triumphantly, like, towering over the figures of the Phantom Zone. I don't love that it's like, take law and order into the Phantom Zone. Like, that feels like a little...
become the wardens.
Yeah. But, yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about this, Alan, when you were saying it was hellish. I'm like, or is it purgatory? Like, is this then the next stage after being in the hellish underverse in this adventure if Superman is Dante at this point in it all. And I don't think that the bulk of the text supports that, but it is interesting that we go from a story about what is very much a hell reality to one that hinges on putting everything into a space that is basically a pause button.
I think that totally makes sense. And certainly for the effects of this story, I think it is that middle ground between life and the hell depression of the bizarre world. It's just a space and a void.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a lot more going on than what I took it as on my first read. I was like, oh, Kryptonians. Oh, they just show up. Cool. Wait, what? It feels kind of jarring if you're not in for the larger ride of like, here are the labors of Superman.
Right.
And here's the send up to all the things that we love about Silver Age stuff. Like, if you're coming at it from like a post-crisis perspective on comics, like this is going to feel real weird. But in this broader context, in being this big story that is out of continuity and whatnot, it, does have this like very poetic quality to it all. But why don't we move on then to what is really like getting to the finale of the story, like getting into the meat and potatoes as Superman logs everything, which is great because I love that as like a callback to those great scenes of Superman like etching into metal with his fingernail, like his journals and so forth. As we go into the story of coming up with the diplomatic solution for the Kandor situation and moving into Lex Luthor's plot
and writing a will too. I mean, he's writing his story, but it is also like, I think the title of the issue is actually the last will and testament of Superman. This is a lot going on in this, and it really does not. It feels like this is one of the issues that feels like a much bigger part of the story. There's stuff going on here that is consistent. What he does with the Infinite Universe Queek, there's definitely some resolution there, but for the most part, this feels like Superman has finally accepted his death. Here's the setup.
Yeah, this is sort of packing up the house. And I mean, it's a callback to when he told Lois to think of the fortress not just as a place he stores things and goes to when he needs to not hear people in the surrounding 100-mile radius around him. It's a time capsule. One of the things a time capsule needs to do is give you context. And so him facing the end of his life is trying to give some final thoughts in terms of, future generations, I was here for the beginning of the age of superheroes. I'm not going to make it till the end. So here's what I think about things so far. And then just trying to tidy up little bits of the world here and there of again, just his increased curiosity, intelligence being put to its absolute limit of what can I do right now?
Without using that increased curiosity to be arrogant. Like, we're not getting this sort of high level view of like a Miracle Man type scenario where it's like, I don't have time for regular people anymore. Right. Because this is the issue where we get probably the most famous page from this whole comic, which is the girl who's on the ledge and Superman gives her a hug. And like, I mean, it's a beautiful page that we all talk about for a reason. Mm-hmm. He is there for the little people and also the very little people, because there's a Kandor subplot, and I couldn't help but make that joke. But like,
how dare you?
There's big idea stuff here. He makes a whole tiny little universe so he can observe what a world without Superman is like, which is so fucking rad, and also so fucking Morris.
I mean, and again, talk about seeds planted earlier. The Infinite Universe of Queek first appears in the 1990 series JLA. In Rock of Ages, when our heroes visit the alternate dimensional world of Wonder World, there it is. And then Morrison visits it again in JLA Classified, and then connects it to the Seven Soldiers villain, the Nebula Man, and then it leads into a whole Seven Soldiers saga later. So this little universe gets around in different forms in different parts of the DC multiverse. And here, it's just, again, you're absolutely right. The curiosity is not arrogance. It's enthusiasm. He is not looking at this little universe and thinking like, I am your god. It's just, I wonder what they're going to do. And I hope I just keep the outside of it safe.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nods here to those JLA Classified issues, which do feel like a prequel to this book. Queek is our world. It's us. It's the one that we're on, of us talking right now. I mean, that's a big center part of JLA Classified, but it's nailed to like specific historical occurrences here.
Yeah.
Where like we literally see Nietzsche writing his Superman book. It's not disguised that it's meant to be us. I think that's such an interesting thing where, you know, the moral of this issue, and Queek doesn't really come up again in the book, is that, you know, without Superman, we'd have to make it. Right? That's kind of like, it's so clearly put on the page. But I think it's beautiful that even Superman has to do that. You know what I mean? Like he has to figure out how to do that in himself.
Because almost like his fascination with Queek and his admiration of Queek sort of puts this nice idea into mind of like, oh, we're his heroes too, which I rather like. And in case when you bring up, you know, there's no one too small to help, there's no one too insignificant to help, is to me one of the things that made Superman groundbreaking in 1938. Because we had costumed crime fighters and adventure heroes before him. You know, Scarlet Pimpernel is sort of a proto superhero. And then in 1915, Russell Thorndike writes Dr. Sin, the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh, a pirate turned reverend who dresses up like a scarecrow and is fighting the British authorities while protecting his parishioners and helping their smuggling operations. And then that story gets retold with a more charming protagonist in Zorro a few years later. Eventually we get to the Shadow, the Green Hornet, Lone Ranger. But all of those guys were fighting a specific political corruption system, a corrupt political system, or major crime lords, major terrorists who basically threatened entire cities. Even if it was something where one of their friends was in danger, the friend was in danger from a crime lord running blackmailers as opposed to one blackmailer or someone who was really like high up there and the police couldn't touch. Superman, coming out in 1938, being made by two guys who grew up in the Depression era, they were really feeding a lot of we want a different kind of hero who in the first issue is fighting and hunting down a corrupt politician and a gang lord, but also goes out of his way to stop a guy beating his wife, which is groundbreaking to see in 1938 called out. And also in the first couple pages of the story alone calls out the police and the governor for having arrested the wrong person for a crime they didn't commit and having convicted that person. It was this new take on our costumed hero isn't just going to focus on the big threats or the threats the police can't handle. The police probably can handle some of these, but he's there and he can help. So he's going to.
And he will help, which is the other part of it. Not just because the cops could help in a lot of these spots, but would they in these moments?
Yeah. And I feel like that's really emphasized here. And especially it's so key because we just had all these issues of huge concepts of Kryptonians coming to Earth and thinking of terraforming, of, you know, predatory planets trying to pull our world into a gravity well in an underverse, Superman becoming a version of Doomsday and chronovores. And now we juxtapose that with a train crash, and then there's a young person who thinks this is it, and they're alone, and no one cares. That's not less important. He's not heading there less quickly.
I think there's something in the structure of this one to me that speaks to me. If we were to create a series of bullet points about what Superman does in his day-to-day life, wakes up in the morning, does something in the Fortress of Solitude, punches a robot, talks to Lois, saves somebody. And that's basically the plot beats of this issue. But there's death in every single one of those things. Mechano Man, the robot, has Alzheimer's. He's alive, but it's not a good thing that he's reached his elderly age. It's not a good thing where he is. He is finally getting time to spend Lois as his true self, and he cannot even focus to what she's saying because all he can pay attention to are dead skin cells falling off of her face. The rescuing the girl is so it's such a beautiful page, but there's a lot of thematic death in it as well, right? He's not telling her like, you have a purpose, you have meaning, I'm going to save you, I'm going to rescue you, I'm going to put you in a better place. No, he tells her that her fears are real, right? Like, God, I would understand if your therapist didn't answer the phone, but they seriously did have that problem, and sometimes life's hard like that. He's not romanticizing his own death when he's writing this own will. He hates it. He sees it everywhere. And even though he sees that joy and that spark of life in the infinite universe, what allows him to go forward on his path to mourning and accepting his own mortality is allowing the candor issue, in quotes, to be handled by someone else, to hand that to somebody else who can pick that problem up and actually do something with it. He's realized the limitations of his own perspective, even if he's suffering by having to face death constantly.
Yeah, and what a resolution to the candor situation also.
Oh, yeah.
Just put him on Mars. But that gives way to these big ideas, like then using them to fight diseases for, they try on Superman and it doesn't work, but he takes them to a sick ward, and like it's him now being like, oh, I can't do it, but the smallest, like my smallest kin can, like they can go in and work miracles that I never could.
What he says to Quintum as soon as he sees all of the Kandorians on Mars is, wow, it's such a good and simple solution. I can't believe I never thought of it. Like, the answer was here the whole time. I needed to trust someone else.
Which again is contrasting him against someone like Luthor, where it's not a resentment of, well, I would have thought of it if I hadn't been, saving the world from antimatter creatures. That's amazing, man.
Yeah, exactly.
You're amazing. It's genuine appreciation of someone else. He doesn't have to be a loser for you to be a winner. He's not going to take that poison into himself. And likewise, as you said, he's not romanticizing things to the young woman. He doesn't say, tell me what's going on and we'll fix it together. He just says, you are stronger than you think, which is both supportive but also acknowledging, I can't fix this for you.
And then at the end, we see in a world without Superman, we do create him. And simultaneously, on the world that we've been watching, Clark Kent is writing kind of his own obituary.
Yeah. I also love that we get to, in those flashes, to Earthquake, the philosopher who was part of Morrison's inspiration for this story. Speaking of philosophy people are imitators. Humanity is a race of imitators. We see a bird and we want to fly, and we see fish and we try to figure out how to also swim like that, or how to go that deep. So if we just try to be as we imagine angels are, what is to stop us from becoming more angelic? What is to stop us from becoming if we can imagine it, then isn't that at least partly a possibility? Which
ties directly into the Bizarro stuff about fiction being so powerful that it can have real meaning and real effects on people's lives. And I mean, you can see Superman writing about Earth Q as a fiction, but it's really not. It's presented as just as real as any other place in the DC universe. Superman could go to Earth Q and meet, like, I don't know, my neighbor or something. It's just as likely.
I remember there was an idea Morrison floated about occasionally Superman having stories on Earth Q and disguising himself as Hyperman, which is an old reference to another Golden Age story. But that way he didn't disrupt the world of Earth Q with the history or the narrative fiction and stuff like that. And it was just, yeah. There are so many ideas peppered here that some of which Morrison explored later and some of which never got picked up again. And much like Leo Quinton, I find that a shame that some of these ideas were never picked up again. But on the other hand, they get to stay so lovely and not overused or undermined by staying centric to this story. No.
Dang it. Who was the guy in the little crystal orb that Superman gets out of the box?
Oh, he's talking to someone from the future. God, I don't remember.
I had a half second when I was rereading this being like, oh, is this a message from Earth Q? And I think it's a reverse time capsule, or rather a time capsule sent back in time, and it's lead shielded, and it's this broken English that makes it difficult to understand because it's someone trying to communicate to Superman this thing. Again, themes of time travel are pervasive in this whole thing, and this is a big spot for it. And then like the whole actual Superman is dead newspaper headline is revealed to be a time trap that Superman's kind of aware of, and I think partially because of this message he gets, because the message references solar intelligence systems, and that's the big tip-off of who the secret bad guy in this whole series has been.
Gotcha. I will take your word for it.
It's deliberately obtuse because it's using this weird kind of future jargon type very broken by a person who wouldn't even speak English the way at all at that point, because presumably technology and all the ways that we communicate with each other have advanced so much that this is like some sort of crude metric of speech. And also language drift, because I will tell you what, if I tried to talk to someone at the time of Chaucer, they would understand some words, and that's about all you could say.
And I mean, Morrison plays with that in a few places. That future speak just becomes more like how people were text messaging in 2003, where it's a combination of just syllables and numbers and stuff like that. That's an idea that Morrison likes to play with here and there, that our language just keeps becoming more compact as we go further, which Morrison views as both a good and bad thing, because it can also echo new speak in certain dystopian realities.
Yeah, there's an element of that, I believe, in the Batman time travel story as well, where all of the cave people speak in cave drawings rather than words.
So why don't we move on to Red Sunday? So the story opens with Lex Luthor being put in the electric chair, and then he doesn't die.
which is a direct reference to a Golden Age Luthor storyline. Because in Superman 13 in 1941, he created an identity for himself as the Light, where he was kidnapping and hypnotizing politicians. Superman arrived, he escaped. Then, and this was right after yet another scheme had been foiled. So now he's just so obsessed, like, no, you're going to stop beating me, which leads directly into a 1942 story in Action Comics 47, Power Stone, where Luthor chemically treats his body so that now he can absorb electricity and convert that either to superhuman strength or re-release it as bursts of lightning and shocking electricity. But this is temporary, and he runs out of juice, and then he's also not sure like if this will be a permanent change. So he wants to find the mystical Power Stone, which is supposed to be a stone from another planet that will give him powers as great as Superman, maybe greater. And they fight, the strength wears off. Luthor is finally arrested for the first time in the character's history. And then that leads into Superman issue 17, same year, just a couple months later. And Luthor is to be executed. You kind of assume that the cops figured his power ran out and that he could no longer absorb electricity, and Clark doesn't make any mention of it. Interestingly, also, Clark is told to cover the execution and doesn't want to. He finds that, watching Luthor's death is not something that would bring him joy, and he doesn't want to witness it all, but he's sent there. And then, it's a very similar scene of the lever is pulled, Luthor's in the electric chair, and it's all electrifying, and then he just starts laughing and gloating because he's super strong again, actually stronger than he was before. This is reactivated his super strength, charging up even more. He goes off and grabs the Power Stone. They have a big fight. Then Superman tricks him into losing the Power Stone. He loses all his powers entirely. And after that, he's back to Scientist Luthor. But this is a direct reference to that Golden Age story, the third part of which was When Titans Clash in Superman 17. And those stories were all done by Superman creators Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster.
Yeah, so just such deep tributes all throughout this whole thing.
It's also the strongest Golden Age tribute. Most of this stuff in All-Star Superman has been a love letter to the Silver Age, the 50s and 60s. But this is the deepest, along with, I think, just, the occasional Superman swagger when he's taking on a couple guys. Like, this is the deepest Golden Age cut.
Yeah, so Luthor frees himself now that he has superpowers, and he goes back to Nasty and starts to prepare his takeover. And that's when Superman is also seemingly, rearming himself. And surprise, it's an evil sun, but Superman's aware.
Solaris.
Yes.
I love the idea of Solaris. I love that there's a sentient artificial sun and that it went evil.
Yeah.
Solaris rules. There's another Superman.
Such a great idea. Like Superman weakened by a red sun. How about an evil red sun?
And now
with one eye.
He's not only evil too, he's a dick. Like he's like rude and taunts Superman, and like it's such a funny interpretation of like this gigantic cosmic, completely imperceptible thing for human beings, just acting like a petty jerk online.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's on first glance Lovecraftian, but then speaks like an internet troll.
It really does.
Why not powerless in my red rays?
It's also an interesting throw for the rest of the book, because we see Superman constantly fighting these like giant cosmological forces that are given some sort of body or form. Time, oppression, death, and in this instance, it's the sun, like literally the sun. But instead of having an abstract relationship with it, this is a superhero comic, so you gotta punch that thing.
Punch it right in the eye.
It's also, again, brings us full circle, because one of the early lines in chapter 1, after he has been supercharged and is now poisoned by Earth's actual sun, is, how ironic that the source of my powers will kill me when so many things have failed. And now he's, where that was irony and that was abstract thinking. Oh, a sun has destroyed me. Now there's literally a sun trying to destroy him and trash talking him while it's at it. I can't punch my cancer, but I can punch you.
Yeah, we also bring back the Sun Eater that had been released previously.
Great.
It's sad that it doesn't make it through. Like I didn't think I'd feel sympathy for a Sun Eater at any point. Justice for Pharaoh, but here we are. Morrison has done it.
And honestly, it's the closest thing you see to Superman actually having a child on camera, right? Any sort of partner or someone who relies on him. He's shown earlier in the work having to feed it, and that food is work that no one else could really do. And suddenly here we are. It's it's not the same as watching Krypto die, but it ain't that different, for the way Superman treats them both. And that's beautiful, because obviously Krypto is literally like just a cute dog that looks like Superman sometimes. But the Sun Eater is presented as like a drooling shadow creature. Like it's very quote unquote unlovable. But Superman's relationship with it throughout this work is, it was small and it got lost, and it deserves a chance too. And then at the end, because he was so gracious in the past and so gracious with his time, there's the nature of the thing has changed.
And it so nicely works with this arc upward from after we've left the Bizarro dimension of constantly Superman, through his kindness, causing others to turn villainy or harm or depression into hope and help. And you have that with Zabaro, and then the next chapter, his relatives from Krypton facing death with dignity and becoming more chilled. Then you have that with here the Sun Eater is turning good, and also there's a robot revealed to have betrayed Superman, but Superman's so good that the robot is so affected by his example that it still goes against its reprogramming and is able to attempt to help Superman, even though this will cost its existence. It's again just that influence of like the good you put out there won't be perfect. Not everything will be solved, but it can be rewarded, and it can affect other people in ways you will not predict, but which will be positive. And it's lovely. I also, on a totally other level, love the design of the Superman robots in this book. Superman robots I've always had a mixed relationship with. I like the idea when they were identical to Superman. I thought this is dumb, and it leads open to too many lazy story possibilities later. I like them when they look more like robots, and here I love that we're not even trying to have them look like Superman. They've got blue capes instead of red. They've got their own style. I think it's a great design for the Superman robots in this series.
Yeah, so on not the last episode, because the last episode was part one of this, but the episode prior, we talked about Superman Doomsday, the the early 2000s animated adaptation of the Doomsday Fight.
Yes.
And I found the robot designs in that kind of annoying because it was like a little like they had weird like Alpha 5 style heads that was like kind of like Kalex, but at the same time they had bodies kind of like these robots here, and it was just sort of like too much of things were going on here. And I like this one here because it does still feel like that Silver Age idea of they're patterned off of Superman, but they look like Vision, or like they look, or like, some other, they're their own thing, which I dig. Because it is weird that he would just have like perfectly identical robots to himself.
No, that's really weird and is self-love in a way that I don't find healthy. I find that very suspect.
They did that. They tried to use that in the Justice Lords episodes of Justice League.
Yes.
Right. Which made sense to me there, because that is a Superman who has decided to become a conqueror, and so yeah, for that power trip, having identical robots, like basically being surrounded by your own image, who's also serving you, it's like, yeah, that makes sense in a sick way, sure.
Well, they're just kind of like Doombots if they all just like look like Superman at that point.
Yeah,
it's just like, you didn't kill the real Superman. The real Superman is over there.
Exactly.
You
it
killed
leads
the
to
robot.
too many lazy get out of jail free cards.
There's an interesting parallel here between both the Sun Eater and the Superman robots, and Luthor and Nostalgia, because in the end of the series, or the end of the issue, we see Superman showing kindness to even Solaris, right? Like, you just killed this thing I love, and you still deserve that sense of grace and dignity. And Luthor inspires none of that in Nasty, right? She's not with him because she likes him or admires him, but because she worships death and like romanticizes death, right? She talks about how it'd be beautiful to get married and then kill herself and kill everyone else. And it's such an interesting parallel where Luthor's trying to create that same sense of interconnectivity that Superman's discovering, but he inspires nothing. He inspires nothing. No one follows his lead. And even someone with his last name doesn't understand brilliance or science or genius, but just worships death. That's kind of all it is.
Yeah, it's Superman in trying to help all these people and in helping other people self-actualize and self-realize and become more self-aware is leaving a legacy that doesn't have to be about carrying on his name. He does meet the Superman squad, but in the present modern day wherein the story takes place, he's not telling Jimmy or Lois or anything like, so when I'm gone, please continue wearing my t-shirt and speak stories of me and maybe change your name to L, or like what, like it's not, it doesn't have to be that direct a legacy. It's just know yourself, be kind, look out for each other. And so in doing it that way, he is creating a great legacy. And Luthor has no legacy. You're right, because Nostalgia is not thinking Luthor is going to make us a better world and we deserve it. It's Luthor's probably going to win, and I want power. I want to have people I can beat up. This seems an easy way to do it. He doesn't ask a lot of me. I don't have to fill out a resume. It's there's no real training period involved, apparently. I get access to cool weapons, and I get to, look down on people who told me that hard work would pay off. This seems great. And that's it. And it's such a fragile idea, such a petty idea. Like, there's no legacy, there's no longevity to it.
Just the selling point of a monster truck tank.
That's an interesting parallel to me because, we see this is the third character now to have been given Superman's temporary powers for a day, between Jimmy and Lois. And the beauty of this Luthor character and this interpretation of Luthor is that, like, he's jealous of Superman, right? He hates him for being who he could never be. But Superman has a whole Fortress of Solitude full of robots and futuristic science machines to help him make this serum. And Luthor does it like 6 months later with shit he finds in prison. Like, he's really not that far behind Superman. Humanity isn't that far behind Superman at all. But we're lost in ourselves and we're lost in our own petty insecurities to ever really see that or understand that.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like, Luthor because he's so self-focused, because he's so petty, and because he's looking for that tangible proof of power and reward, misses some obvious things. Like, you made a robot in prison that can recite books and then also do so in such a way it can become a drill. And instead of revolutionizing construction across the world, or possibly rescue efforts for cave-ins and such, you're just like, this will break me out of prison so I can brag about how brilliantly I broke out of prison. Are you joking? And then along with that, like, it's funny, one of my favorite Luther moments has to do with, as I said earlier, Otto Binder made the initial stories of Hercules and Superman meeting. In one of those stories in 1960, Luther summons Hercules to take on Superman, to be his muscle. And he does this from prison. And we see that he's able to make a time ray. We don't see everything he's using, but we see that the main ingredients of the time ray seem to be a clock, paper clips, some extra gears and wire, a shaving mirror to reflect sunlight coming in from the window into the power cells, which apparently are solar powered, and they specifically say this, aspirin. And together, all of that made a time ray. And it's like, mother trucker.
MacGyver.
It's pointed out by Superman later. If you wanted to save the world, you could have. Look at everything. Look at what you do when almost out of boredom.
Yeah, look at all the things you can make out of scraps in a cave.
Yeah. But because it doesn't make you look cooler than me to your mind, because it doesn't fit your definition of strength versus legacy versus altruism versus changing the effing world, you didn't pursue that. Like, how childish are you?
Very.
Yeah.
That is correct. Well, so thank you.
Very.
Thank you. That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
So issue 11 ends with Superman reverting. Well, first off, he punches out Solaris and there's like a nuclear explosion when he does so. He goes back to the Daily Planet and apparently dies as he submits the Superman dead headline. And Luther shows up in the cliffhanger, just like floating there, like ready to kill the staff. And we pick up issue 12 and Superman is dead and in space radio heaven, for lack of a better word on this one. And we find out that Kryptonians, as they die, their consciousness becomes radio waves. And Superman is given a choice of either existing in this liminal space of Kryptonian minds, like interacting with each other, or going back and setting things right before he dies. But the choice is like die and it'll be a death of finality, or exist in this sort of mental heaven. And obviously it's Superman. Like, he makes the choice that, allows the story to progress.
It's an interesting representation of the afterlife, because it ties so in. And look, Morrison talks about psychedelics a lot, so I don't think I'm reaching here. But it's clearly sort of a representation of DMT, which is often described as a chemical released in your brain, at or near the process of dying. And, it's one of the best guesses that we have for what happens to us when we die, which is that we're presented our life in sort of a compressed form. And in some cases, people have reported losing a sense of time in the sense that you might stay there forever. But of course, he's Superman. So he is presented with this and then goes, no, I got shit to do. Yeah, I don't care if I have to give everything up. I don't care if I don't live forever. It's a very beautiful moment where you see him die physically. And then you say, "Are you going to die like a man?" And he goes, "No, I'm Superman. I don't die like that. That's bullshit." It's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I had flashes to For the Man Who Has Everything.
Oh, very much so. Yes,
yeah. And while I think there's entirely different things being said, like I can't imagine that there wasn't at least some thought to like pay tribute to what is a super famous Superman story.
It's everywhere in this work, right? The Superman robots and. The sort of weird relationship between he and Lotus. It does feel like, of course, it's a more response to Ray Morrison's writing, but there is a lot of like, I'm going to do a bigger and broader take on this same concept and maybe spread it out a little more. Whereas For the Man Who Has Everything is pretty human.
Yeah.
Yeah. And was very much about sort of grounding down the idea of Krypton and taking away romanticism about it and fairy tale aspects about it and making it just seem like, oh, this is not unlike what could happen to Earth because we've seen this happen before. In this, in the story, starting off as like a dream for Clark in The Man Who Has Everything, and then turning into this terrible nightmare of what could have happened with a cynical Krypton, and if his father gave into cynicism and a form of nationalism. Yeah, the radio wave consciousness. I mean, we've seen that in other Morrison stories, and the whole idea of, you know, if the Underverse and the Phantom Zone don't have to be hell and purgatory, it just becomes that because of your mindset, then heaven is a state of mind as well, quite literally. And does going away now mean I'm cheating myself of being able to achieve this evolution later? Possibly, but someone needs me. And so maybe I'm cheating myself of heaven, or maybe knowing this much will keep me from being able to hit this level of consciousness again later. But yeah, again, that's the price I'm willing to pay. There's work to be done. I rather like that. It also honestly reminded me of in the 90s when Superman became Electric Superman. And we would later discover that this was basically because of a sorcerer trying to bring him into phase with another dimension and screwing it up a little bit so he became this energy being. But initially we didn't know that. Initially we just knew, hey, Superman's becoming more and more energy, and now he looks like he's made of lightning and he's got to wear a containment suit. And we knew it was a way to give the stories a little bit of a kick, to put Superman in a new situation for a while and get reader interest, but we didn't know the why. But I remember my grandfather and I talking about it, and him having just a fan idea of like, well, maybe Kryptonians enter like a different life stage for a time and they can become energy consciousness or something. And this little moment reminded me of that, which also, again, goes into a theme that we see later, like Superman is becoming a star. You know, so the cancer is our perception of the cancer can change, and it's might be destroying your physical body, but you can either then enter a heaven-made world of consciousness on another dimensional plane, another energy plane, whatever you want to call it, and create your paradise or your prison, however you want to see it. It's all up to you. Or you can stay on this world and figure out what being a star means, or what being part of a larger star means. And it's an interesting thing. I also just like the idea that we're not actually told if this is literally Jor-El or Clark's idea of Jor-El. And either way it works, especially when it comes to afterlife stuff. Anytime comic books or certain other shows like really nail down what the afterlife is and what the rules, and like we can talk to this dead person and we can go to heaven and talk to him and get advice or I was like, well, now this is just another place. I don't want heaven and hell to be other planets that you can just, you need a special way to get there, but you can get there and go back and forth. I like the ambiguity of this. Right before we then rocket back to physical threat. Luthor's got my powers. Holy crap, what do we do?
Shoot him with a gun. Alan, you bringing up the electric blue Superman is interesting because I was thinking about that when he first manifests those like energy fields he creates when he in issue 1,
sure.
When he's exposed to the sun. I was like, oh, is that playing some kind of tribute to all of that?
I figured that was playing tribute to. I mean, once we started in the 80s redefining Superman's powers, it was this idea of
lots of psychic powers going on. There's a lot of
right. It's like the idea of like, yeah. Well, we were entering enough realism into the comic book world that we knew if a guy lifts a ship and he just has two hands lifting a whole yacht or a ship that's the size of the Queen Elizabeth II, it's going to collapse because all that strength is being put into 2 points that are the size of a person's hands. So therefore, there must be something more going on. And different writers interpreted that as sort of like there's some kind of psychokinetic energy field, like the force field that makes him invulnerable is extending and lifting the ship, or that his real main power is warping gravity, and that can manifest a superhuman strength, and then also is acting to reinforce things he's lifting. So I just saw it as sort of a thing like that of like, well, if Superman's manipulating gravity or whatever the energy field is that turns his cells into chainmail, each of them superhumanly strong and reinforcing each other, then okay, now he's extending that energy field in a broader way.
I always took the energy Superman as being an extension of that kind of concept,
Gotcha.
and so I didn't think that it was incongruous. And I think that alluding to the sort of like larger energy powers that Superman has under the surface, but they don't necessarily talk about very often, I thought was kind of what was going on there. And it's cool that it's called back here.
The scene where Superman is in purgatory, altered state, DMT moment, or heaven or whatever, colored very similarly to the Bizarro issues. Jor-El appears in both.
Yeah.
And in it's not the same Jor-El. Like, they're not dressed the same, right? It's not King Jor-El in his garbage outfit. But it's clearly representing yet another moment where Superman is given the option to ponder himself forever, right? Like, you can be here and you can try to transcend and you can try to make meaning out of being here. And Superman ultimately rejects it. He's got stuff to do. He's got to go back to our world where there's more than just him.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like in both cases, he's in a place where he's seeing a shade of his biological father. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I also just quickly, because Case brought it up, like it also makes sense to me that Morrison might be giving a nod to Energy Superman or view Electric Superman as an outgrowth of those energy manipulation powers rather than a different Superman. Because frankly, no one did a better version of Electric Superman than Morrison. In JLA, seeing Electric Superman there, that was the only comic book run where I thought, oh man, that's Superman. He's got new powers, he's got a different skill set he's got to use, but look at him go. Like he's not depowered, it's just different, and he's doing amazing things. Like there's a whole in JLA, I want to say issue 7.
Are we talking about the moon?
Yeah,
situation?
the moon.
Yeah.
A demon is making the moon head towards Earth, so Superman grabs some equipment, gives the moon magnetic poles, and then charges it so that it pushes back away from Earth. And it's just a silent splash page of Electric Superman floating between two artificial magnetic poles that he's made in the moon. And I was like, oh my God, like that. Now I get it. Now, like, Electric Superman is still Superman and actually is showing us how creative and smart Superman can be, whatever monkey wrench you throw at him.
Yeah, it's not super strength he's using, it's science strength.
Yes. Perhaps the greatest magic of all, science.
Just missing the purple ray. You'd have the whole thing down.
Oh, well, if they hit Electric Blue Superman with a purple ray so that we had Electric Purple Superman, we would have had, like, the example of a superhero right there.
Electric Purple Superman sounds delicious.
Yeah. I mean, it's grape flavored. Like Lois kissing him is going to be like,
you got
great.
the purple and the blue. I'm expecting some raspberry notes.
Yeah, yeah. The white's the mystery flavor, which is secretly always raspberry.
I'm actually now just thinking I want a drink now called Gravity Gun.
You lose it 5 hours.
It's got to be a high proof because it's going to put you on the floor.
Hey.
On that note, let's get back to the actual confrontation between Superman and Luthor here. So Superman rises up, he uses the gravity gun on Luthor, and at first it's just like, oh yeah, I used one of my myriad weapons that I have, and then Luthor gets shot out, and we've got some good moments here where, like, Luthor says, I should be writing these ideas down because his mind is working at superhuman speeds and so forth. And that's a cool, subtle detail right there. And then we're like, oh yeah, remember that whole thing about how, like, really bad gravity can liquefy time, and how gravity can warp time, and how time travel and time warping has been a huge part of every issue so far. Just sped up that little 24-hour clock you had there, baby.
And again, it subverts the expectations, because many other stories would have been, we got a special gun and we shot him. That's it. I mean, one of my problems with several superhero movies is that they don't show creative solutions as much as the comic books, where a whole team of heroes each has to figure out, I'll use my power this way, which you'll use your power this way, and by doing this in conjunction, we take away their power or we shut off their thing. It instead becomes, if you attack there and I attack there, we can blow this up. or we'll hit hard enough that at a certain point we don't have to hit anymore. And that's fine. It's not as creative or as interesting to me. And here again, it seems like Superman being weakened just grabbed a gun that was powerful enough to do something. It's like, no, because God knows the lethal weaponry that exists in the Fortress of Solitude. And he didn't get any of those devices. He didn't even exile Luthor to the Phantom Zone. He just turned the clock and then made Luthor run out of time because he didn't understand how much time he actually had left, and trusted also that Luthor would waste some of that time because of his ego, because of his arrogance, and gives us one of my favorite scenes ever. Like we've brought up several times about how, of course, Superman sees the world differently because his senses are as enhanced as his physical traits. And Luthor sees that and is shattered, absolutely shattered. The idea that there is now scientific evidence in front of his eyes that we are all in this together is shattering. That human consciousness is so strong it can possibly affect tangible reality. Just how much his ego supporting his paradigm, and now that ego's been faced with questions it can't answer. And Superman doesn't take any gloating about this, like, I made you run the clock. It's, Nostalgia is asking what's going on, and Superman just flatly, like a teacher who just wished the student figured it out earlier before they ran to a wall with scissors, says, he figured out how life works. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, this is something he goes to the chair for. Keep in mind his belief of self-actualization. The entire thing, he's going, I know what I'm doing. I'm the best. I'm confronting this the right way. And he's willing to die for that. There's no guarantee he ever receives this. But in doing so, Superman, inadvertently or inadvertently, by reminding him of his fragility, gives even Luthor a happy ending. Where it's even presented after Superman's, the son now, was, I believe it's Jimmy brings it up. He just says, even Luthor showed remorse. Even Luthor showed humanity.
Yeah.
I also took the scene as being like the truest, or rather the oldest school callback that we can kind of get, which is that I took the scene as also being kind of a reflection of the reign of the Superman, because we've got this bald man who realizes that he had all this power and he let it slip away and didn't make a mark on the world while he had it for this brief period of time. I feel like that is like the ultimate refutation of the evil Superman scenario, because that ultimately wasn't what sold, and that's not what inspired people. It is Superman as a force for good. And Lex Luthor here, slots in pretty well for that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also, it's funny because there is almost, I don't know if cruelty is the right word, harshness. There's a harshness then because Luthor has the ability to regain those powers, and Superman shatters it in front of him. And Luthor is initially bring up, well, wait, but I see things now. Now that I see things differently, I can save the world. And Superman just like, you would have already. And it can seem harsh because, like, well, wait, maybe he needed this paradigm shift. Maybe he needed to see the world the way you see it to fix things. But it's again like Luthor actually doesn't need any powers to fix the world. If his paradigm's already shifted, that should be good enough. Now the rest is up to him to actually become a better person, instead of asking or even demanding power first and then assuring us he'll be better now. He actually hasn't put in the work to be trusted with that. And again, with all his inventions, doesn't need that power. He doesn't need that power.
And I think he's sent back to jail,
yeah.
In fact. Like, he really is. Mm-hmm. He is, quote-unquote, punished for his crimes. But I think the beauty of it is that, like, in doing so, in forcing Lex to have this beauty of self-awareness, Superman conquers his own fear of death in the process by becoming and recognizing the interconnectedness of even him to someone like Luthor, right? Like, you can't escape the fact that it's all of us. Or what does Luthor say? It's just all of us in here together, and that's all there is. That's all we've got. It's a beautiful thing that in that process, Superman is finally willing to let go, right? He's finally comfortable, and he's finally ready to go fly into that big sun.
Which we should have noted, but earlier, part of Solaris' attack on our world was not only did Solaris fill our skies with red sunlight, he also or it also poisoned our star so that it was blue, and apparently toxic to our life. So Superman has to go deal with the sun trying to kill us all.
It's funny because that whole self-acceptance of, okay, I'm ready to let go now, and I'm ready to enter this new stage, which will be isolated, but what's killing me is actually just destroying my body, but maybe I can exist beyond that, and if I can, then I can fix the sun. And if that's what I have to do for the next 853 centuries, then, or 833 centuries, then, you know, that's what I'm going to do. And what I love about that is that in that acceptance, in that I think I'm strong enough to do this, I love you, goodbye. The page arrangement, the panel arrangement mirrors when we saw him with the young woman contemplating suicide and was telling her, you are stronger than you think you are. And we, in that arrangement, that long, tall panel on the side of the page is emphasizing to us the height they are and the danger of she could have stepped off that ledge, but thank goodness she's here. And here on this page, that long, tall panel is Lois looking up as Superman launches into the sky, because there's work to do and I'm ready to do it, and it's going to be okay. And what a great visual callback.
I do also like the fact that you start to see the cell degradation in his face, and like the energy is starting to burst through his skin at this point. And now it's sparkling around him too.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like almost a form of watching him die in slow motion, right? Like you're seeing for the first time Superman be visibly ill. I mean, we're told that he's sick this entire time, but never slows him down, really. But here it is, that last moment where he really can't deny it's all breaking up. And it's spectacular. Yeah. It's like fireworks, really.
Yeah, he bursts into the sky and like has as like a flaming comet and races into this blue star and makes it yellow so that we can live again. Truly amazing stuff there. And then we get this like nice little epilogue of like Lois still holding out hope for him, and Jimmy still having wild shit. Like he just shows up with a jetpack because, you know, it's Jimmy Olsen. He's got access to that shit.
But also part of that is that now Jimmy can fly just like Superman, right? The world's moved on, and there's still room for that.
Yeah.
And we got a shot of Superman, and it's like this really like interesting. I don't know what art style it's reflecting, but it feels like something like 19th century-ish depiction of like the heart, like literally like he's framed in what appears to be a heart, but it's like a mechanical heart. Yeah.
It's like glass tubes and all. It's very to me, you know, that sort of early 20th century working man, the sweat of your brow is going to help us idea. And it goes to, I mean, initially when they were even thinking about Superman as being a heroic character, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, before they thought of the costume, we're just picturing him as this Herculean dude with no shirt and trousers, who looked like he could have just walked off a construction site. Yeah, you've got he's still at heart, and in a literal heart, this sort of Depression era working class hero who just wants to make sure that we're okay.
Yeah. Every time I see this panel, I think he's wearing overalls, right? And he's not. But like that's just is the design. Like he feels like a John Henry type right here, like so much so. But nope, he's still just in a Superman costume.
It would be great if he had made himself overalls, and then like you check on him later, and he's also got like a fun train conductor's hat, and he's just living his best life. He's made himself a breakfast nook in the corner of the heart, and then a reading area in the other corner of the heart.
He's igniting the sun, but he's also creating sunproof jeans at the same time.
Yeah, like I mean, he's a guy. He's got to sit down from time to time. He's got to be comfortable.
Yeah, Kansas modesty still is in place.
Yeah, sure. That's very true.
Yeah. And so it's like, but it's also that wonderful, you know, what you were saying, June, about the world continues. It's so funny to me because there are other stories of a superhero retiring, and particularly like some folks who do a story of Superman's final story, or their idea of Superman's final story, where there's an implication of, and then everything went back to normal and we didn't really have supervillains anymore, and for some reason there weren't new generations of mad scientists and da 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 da. You know, it's like, no, some things went back to normal, some things have changed, Jimmy Olsen is still a person who's been on these amazing adventures and can have a rocket pack, and strange adventures will still be happening. The Parasite still exists. Other villains still exist. Batman and Robin are still out there doing their thing. And yeah, just that the ending is the ending of this story, but it's not the ending of Superman. You're not seeing Lois die. You're not seeing, and then Earth was fine forever. Just things go on. And you know what? Who knows what will happen next? Because Quantum seems to be making a Superman 2, a Superman Secundus, and we don't know how that'll go. Morrison did confirm that the young guy with Golden Superman Prime, who shows up at the end of the time travel issue with Paul Kent, is a young Superman Secundus. Still doesn't tell you anything. Does he have dark years? What is the extent of his powers? Does he stay on Earth the whole time? Does he go off and become a wandering adventurer or sage? There's lots of open possibility there, and I think that's great because there is something. One of the things about the longevity of comics is there is always that idea of to be continued, and something can come next, and something can be revised or reapproached, and to have that feeling, but also still present an ending, to present something that does also work as the last Superman story is, we'll say it again, like a very lovely balancing act to me.
I definitely read the ending as Superman getting his happy ending, in the sense that Jimmy's still Jimmy. The world's still moving on. Nobody's so devastated or torn apart by his death that things are going to stop or going to slow down or be grim. But he does leave his hope with Lois, right? Like, he does pass that on. There is still a part of him there. And that's very, very beautiful. Like, you get your happy ending even if you don't get to see it.
Again, you don't need the tangible proof that Luthor was demanding.
Mm-hmm. And that's what he has to accept before he is ready to let go, right? Like, that's sort of like, I'm not going to be here and that's okay. It's a very beautiful book. Like, I can't think of another superhero book that takes so much care and attention to study one topic for 12 issues straight, the way that this does Superman trying to understand and accept his own death. But it's so rich. Every single one of these interpretations and every single one of these false Supermans that are in front of him that can't accept death. You know, at the end, it's just a very peaceful and calm and quiet world.
Yeah, just a really thoughtful work that is paired with really fantastic art. Like we praise Quietly at the top, but like, you know, we haven't really talked about like all the brilliant panel layouts. Like Alan, you brought up the parallel structure between the suicide scene and then the Superman send off, but like so many wonderful layouts. Like in the prison issue when like they're walking down the stairs of the prison and like we are seeing them literally at each of the, like the different points or like the different landings of the steps while having zoom ins on the left and right flanking it. You know, just really, really interesting works that's like outside of the normal, like either a 9-panel grid or whatever kind of like much more rigid structures that we're dealing with. Like Quietly's like really playing with panel layouts in order to give senses of movement or to give us perspectives on how scenes should be interpreted. You know, and again, we cited that the color and everything by Jamie Grant is stunning. Like the book is a visual treat on top of everything else, and it is narratively so fulfilling, especially when taken as a whole.
And I mean, every cover works beautifully just as its own poster.
Very true.
You know, just amazing work. And yeah, so many panels, so many pages just are quite stunning. And also just there are books out there where this is a great penciler, but maybe the inker went too heavy on things and didn't quite match their energy, or it's a great inker and pencil team, but colors are a little bit off for the tonality, or, you know, great art, story ain't quite right, or like great story, man, that art didn't really convey the crowd in the way that art writer clearly meant the crowd to be conveyed, or didn't convey the scope the writer clearly wanted to have. And here, no, everyone worked so beautifully together.
You could tell they had a lot of fun with certain scenes in this book, like when the Bizarros first attack.
Oh yeah,
and there's a panel where they're like actively running around the city, switching things around, like the McDonald's signs. and like flipping the one-way street signs upside down, so they're pointing the other direction. You can tell they had a lot of fun with those.
Every single scene where Superman accidentally saves someone by fumbling as Clark Kent is just like quietly stunting so hard. Just this incredible visual motion and language. Like you didn't have to draw 14 after images of Clark Kent spilling coffee, but you get that in the first issue to let you know what you're in for. That's very, very cool. It's so devoid of irony. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is such an honest and authentic work, and the art complements that so much, because I think if at any point in time it was played a little tongue in cheek, it really wouldn't hit that hard.
There's a simplicity to the artwork at times, because sometimes you'll just have, rather than overly complex backgrounds and perspectives, sometimes you'll just have two people against a gray background, and you understand they're at the fortress or they're walking in a hallway or something, but like the focus is these two people and how are they looking at each other, and letting that speak for the scene. And then you'll have hyper detail on when you see Kandor in the Bottle City. It's not 3 or 4 buildings that are like there are a couple dozen buildings layered onto. There's a sense of scale and depth there. And same thing with the time sphere and the Fortress of Solitude. It's not just here are 2 chairs and a control panel and somehow this travels. No, there's levers and wires and interconnecting parts underneath. And then just, I mean, I think it was the 3rd time I was reading the comic, and I realized that the space shuttle in the Fortress of Solitude is Columbia, which immediately invites you of, it's not our world, man. And why are we pretending that superheroes live in our world? Which is something Morrison constantly brings up. Like, it's not our world. In this world, Superman stopped that or helped it in some way.
This work even posits that we need that world. We need Superman to live in a world that's not our own for us to get that idea of what humanity could really do or be. It goes right back to the liminal spaces that were existing in the Bizarro stories, where Superman's the fairy for us, right? Superman's our glimpse into a different world. It's not ours, but ours could look a little more like that.
Yeah, it's again, we might not be able to ever literally become angelic, but in the process of trying, what could we become that's in between here and there?
How do we gain Superman's perspective? Right? The thing that everyone's missing the entire work, and the gift that he grants everybody, his perspective and his ability to sense the world and be present in it.
I would love to have sat in or read the notes that were sent to Frank quietly and just like, so this is what a chronivore looks like. and just bring that perception to life of like, it's silly but scary at the same time. It's something that's implying it exists in different dimensions, and therefore we can only see parts of it. We can't see the whole, which is another idea Morrison loves and that they've used for Batmite and creatures in the Invisibles and other things.
Oh yeah, totally in the Invisibles. The Filth too is a great one about that sort of distance in space.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that we looked at this again. It's been a while since I've read it, and I was really happy to really like sit down and read it from start to finish, especially after, like I said, having reread so much Morrison stuff and read future Morrison stuff. You know, June, you were on when we talked about Action Comics for the New 52 run, so like lots of fun, kind of like re-exploring all that. J. Mike, did you say that you actually hadn't read this all before we prepped for this episode?
Make me feel embarrassed again. No, I hadn't read all this.
I'm not embarrassed. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but like,
they're gonna come for me,
half of the
Case.
show where we shame J. Mike. You are correct to be suspicious.
They're gonna come for me, Case. What have you done?
No, because you read it for this.
I can see the pitchforks and flame torches now.
Case is known for his unforgiving nature and his gatekeeping ways. Like it's very true.
Yeah,
my entire existence is just to persecute everyone around.
We're just treating J. Mike the way that Superman would want us to.
I know.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I read, like, I think the first issue, and I was like, cool, I'll come back to it later. But then I saw, like I said, I saw the movie first. And so that was like my first introduction to the All-Star Superman thing. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot more going on here A little bit. A little bit more. And now that I've seen both, I can appreciate the book for everything that it has in it and everything that's going for it. It's a really good. Oh man, I'm trying to think. Like, is this my favorite Superman book? Because I liked. We've gone over Earth 1 Superman, and we talked about how close that was to the whole Snyderverse thing, and how they were producing that at the same time.
But done right.
They were kind of going over it at the same time, and the Snyderverse thing happened, and then Earth 1 Superman happened. And I really loved that. And Superman for All Seasons, that was a great too. I think this is pretty much right up there with those two as some of my favorite Superman literature.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, it has a lot of runway, so there are series that just would not, just don't have the breathing room to get all the same ideas out. But this is certainly a strong piece. There's a reason why we saved this for episode 100. So it, like I said, I'm really glad that we re-looked at it. I don't know if I'd say it's necessarily my favorite, but it certainly is spending a lot of time with a lot of the ideas that I love the most about Superman. I don't know. I still if anyone, gun to my head, I usually still will go to Superman's Secret Identity as my kind of first choice on that one. But that's also playing with well, what if Superman was in the real world too, which is different themes anyway. Suffice it to say though, this is a great book. It's big and it's fun, but it's still a quick read. You can knock it out in an afternoon without too much effort. It doesn't require a shitload of foreknowledge, and it also doesn't feel like it's stripping it out unnecessarily. There is stuff for people who are continuity wonks and who really appreciate all the weird little details and so forth. So I love it a lot, and I'm really glad to look at it again. June, thank you for coming on. Thank you for bringing a crap ton of notes, and thank you for bringing poetry to discuss.
You might be asking yourself, did you really read poetry? And it's yes. Am I any fun at parties? No, buddy, I'm worse. I read poetry at your damn house.
So June, if people are looking to find you, follow you, where can they find you, follow you, do all that stuff?
You can find me on Twitter at Opal and Juniper. I do not post anymore, I guess. But I'll answer questions. You're welcome to talk to me or shoot me a message or whatever. I also have a podcast that is a game history podcast. It is a study of the history of criminality in video games and the video game business. Our topics include abandonware, copyright law, sampling, white-collar crime, queer erasure, bootlegging, custom firmware, fan translations, and a billion other things. I do that one with my buddy Mike Bachman. You might have heard him from the Drunks and Dragons podcast, now the Greeting Adventures podcast. And we've got some new episodes coming out soon, so, excited to share those with the world. Also on the SHU podcast, I run the show Weird Adventures in Space, and if you like these sort of high-minded, abstract, high fantasy sci-fi ideas, might be up your alley. It's about superheroes trying and failing to create a utopia on Mars. And finally, if you are into card games like I am, I've made a few with a couple of my artist friends of mine. You can get those at poorskeletongames.com.
Yeah, the games are fun. That's actually how we first met, famously. You just had a case full of your prototype card games, and we were in an elevator together, and I was like, what's that? And then next thing I know, it's been years of us just chatting about random superhero shit. So thank you again for coming on, and everyone should check all those out. I got a sneak peek at what will be one of your future Game Crimes episodes at GeeklyCon, talking about sampling, and that was a fantastic time. So everyone should check that out. Check out the Twitch channel also, because y'all do amazing playing games that I've never heard of, having a lot of fun with it, showing off cool hardware.
Yeah, we're goofing around a little bit, but we occasionally do a more serious one. Our next upcoming episode on Game Crimes is about the connections between the Saudi Arabia venture capital funds and modern AAA gaming. So, given everything that's been in the news, feels topical. Come and check it out. Be great. Thank ya.
Wild stuff. Alan, thank you for coming and bringing the wealth of knowledge that you always have on any of these subjects, and the amount of continuity references that I totally missed are very appreciated.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm always happy to discuss history of pop culture and the stories behind the stories, and especially characters like Superman.
Yeah. If there's anything you want to plug today, by all means.
Sure. So once again, if you've not seen it, go to Netflix and find RRR. It's so good, guys. Like you don't understand. It's like you see two bros and you're like, what are they going to do? Could they possibly fight the British? And it's like, well, maybe they will by picking up a leopard and throwing it at a man's face. And you're like, that can't happen, but it does. And it's amazing. And I would also suggest maybe you can go to Amazon and check out Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, which is just a good time. Also, the worst person in the world.
It was like a game of chicken of like, all right, so what is he gonna plug right there?
These are all great things you should watch. That'll improve your life. They'll like clean your teeth. It's good times. And I've got projects.
My teeth are white.
Yeah, I've got projects that I just can't talk about yet, but they'll be out there, and then I'll tell Case, and he'll tell you.
J Mike, where can people find you, follow you? What have you got going on?
I am on Twitter at JMike101. I post funny jokes. I post funny gifs sometimes, and I respond to Case and all the things that he gets me into whenever I can.
This is true. A good chunk of our relationship is me being like, dude, this would be cool. Hey, everyone, tell J Mike this thing is cool. And then everyone just like dogpiles being like, J Mike, this thing is cool.
J Mike, you should tell people to go to Steam and play Night in the Woods also, which is a great game. It's such a good game, folks. I also want to like give a shout out to Laura Hudson, my dear friend Laura Hudson, who recommended RRR and Night in the Woods to me. Game changers. Awesome.
And then as for me, you can find me on Twitter at Case Aiken. You can find the podcast at Men of Steel Pod. You can find more episodes of this show at certainpov.com, where you can also find a link to our Discord server where you can come, get sneak peeks, chat about nerdy stuff, all that jazz. You can also find tons of other great shows. Like I'll be selfish today, which is we've got Another Pass, which is one of my shows. We're coming up on episode 150, so we are doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It's a great time. My co-host Sam Alisea and I have been having so much fun looking at movies and trying to like really get to the heart of like where they didn't work, and for movies that worked really well, like what creativity allowed them to overcome adversity. So that's a cool time. You should also check out the Certain POV YouTube channel. We've got clips of all of, my podcast at least, I've been posting like animated clips to correspond to episode drops, as well as we've got the side quest videos, we've got the Superman analog videos. A lot of great time. But yeah, come back over to certainpov.com, check out the next episode of Men of Steel, because we are continuing our conversation about All-Star Superman by talking about the animated movie, and we've got different great guests for that one. So we'll see you then, and until then, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are J. Mike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo is by Chris Batista. Episode art is by Case Aiken. And our theme is by Geoff Moonen.
Hey, Nerf Herders.
You sure you want to go with that?
Hey, everyone.
There we go. More inviting.
Have you ever had a movie that you really wanted to love, but something holds you back?
Or one that you did love in spite of a flaw?
Well, I'm Case Aiken.
And I'm Sam Alisea.
And on Another Pass, we sit down with cool guests to look at movies that we find fascinating.
But flawed.
And we try to imagine what could have been done when they were made to give them that little push.
We're not experts. We just believe in criticism.
Constructive criticism.
Sure.
So come take another pass at some movies with us.
And every now and then, we can celebrate movies that did it on their own, too.
You can find us at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Pass it on.
CPOV.
certainpov.com.